everyone. Welcome to Laser Focus. This is the deep dive pop culture podcast from Nerdist. I'm Kyle Anderson. Thank you so much for listening. Folks, this week we are talking about Daredevil, and specifically Daredevil Born Again, the Disney Plus series, which just wrapped up its first season, first of two, possibly more, but at least two. The second season of which is currently filming or just started filming. To join me to talk about Daredevil is somebody who is brand new to the podcast, not been on before. You may know this person as a staff writer at Popverse, also a contributor to DC and here at Nerdist. Covers all manner of pop cultural things from gaming to lit to comics, and wrote a very excellent piece, which we'll get into, which kind of I guess spurred my reading of Daredevil, because I had never really read Daredevil before. The best comic runs history, which about a year and a half ago now, I think that went up. Please welcome to the show, Jules Chin Greene. Hi, Jules. How are you?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Thank you for joining me on the show to talk
Thank
about
you for
Daredevil.
having me.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about, your kind of comic history. I know you to be a fan of Daredevil, but how did you get into Daredevil? All of that malarkey.
Yeah, so I would say as an adult, really, like Daredevil, aside from the X-Men, was like kind of when I came back to comics as like this is a thing I'm going to consciously get into. And so I was in college and I grew up in New York City and I didn't really have any money when I was in college. So whenever I would come home during breaks, I would go over to Forbidden Planet near Union Square, and I would just go to the Daredevil section and just read the trades. And I remember on one occasion they had this trade that was a collection of the first part of um, Bendis and David Mack's run, and I just remember seeing David Mack's watercolors for the first time in that story with Ben Urich, and just my head just exploded. I was like, "Oh my god, I've never seen anything like this in a comic book." Because like before that, I was just reading a lot of like Claremont X-Men and like those black and white essential trades,
Mm.
which was great. But like reading something in the 21st century was just I think something I needed. And of course, like this was around the same time as the Netflix show, and I think really what spoke to me about Daredevil and what really seemed important to me was that um, there was a lot that I could relate to with the story. Like I'm half deaf, for instance, and like I'm also like an Irish American from the west side of Manhattan, so it's like he's kind of my guy. Like there's a lot of parallels there, and there were a lot of aspects about my family's experience, at least like within this country, that were reflected within their Murdochs, as tragic as that whole thing can be. Um, so I guess like Daredevil very very quickly kind of established himself as kind of my guy within the Marvel universe.
Yeah, I was always a big fan of Daredevil from his appearances in like cartoons and things like that, and also the I you know I'll go out and say it. I haven't watched it in a million years, but I did like that Ben Affleck movie when it came out. I was, however old I was, early college maybe when it came out, but I remember enjoying it quite a bit. But what the first Daredevil I ever read was the Guardian Devil stuff, because I was a
Right.
big Kevin Smith fan at the time. And so from that I kind of gleaned, and the movie, it gleaned some of the, I think, the hallmarks of Daredevil, which while I'd never lived in New York, there's a number of things about him that I do not have in common. I do have Catholic guilt in common. And so that's something that really, I was like, I get this guy. I understand what he's
Yeah.
about. Never feeling like you're you're achieving anything in the eyes of the greater will. So that was something, but it really was your piece about the comic runs that really wanted me. I mean, the show was coming out, so there was a
Mhm.
number of things that kind of got me excited, but um, I had never read, like, I started with Frank Miller's run and Klaus Janson, and it was just like, okay, I this to me makes this is maybe the best, because I got, as with a lot of people, I got real tired of Frank Miller's shtick after a while.
Yeah.
Um, But back then, I feel like that is the best usage of the Frank Miller shtick that I
Mm,
was like, especially having read it after a lot of his other stuff, I was sort of like,
right.
okay, yeah, I I get this. And then
Mhm.
from that, based entirely on your recommendation, I am currently almost finished with the Ann Nocenti run, John Romita Ann Nocenti, and it is really good and
Isn't it?
very dark.
Yeah.
Maybe did not expect it to be as dark as it is.
Yeah. It's just I remember that run in particular. I used to work at a comic shop. Um and just kind of my favorite thing to do was just go through our vintage comic bins, and one day like there was this issue of Daredevil. I was in there from the 80s, and I want to say it was, I used to be really good with knowing my issue numbers off the top of my head, but it's the uh first part of that storyline that he has with Wolverine, where like,
Oh
they,
yeah.
yeah, that's like a devastating storyline. And I just remember seeing the cover and just being like struck by the way that Matt is looking towards the reader. Um, and I started, reading it, and I saw, oh, it's written by Ann Nocenti. Like I was familiar with like her later stuff. Like she wrote this Katana miniseries for DC a while ago. Um, but I was really struck by just how hard hitting it was in terms of like addressing persecution and oppression in a lot of different areas. And I was like, man, this she's really cooking with this. Like I
Mm.
want to see like what's going on with the rest of this run, and here we are today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really I think I'm in the I don't know how close I am to the end, but like I'm in the Mephisto arc currently, which
Right.
is very different from the lengthy, basically like what 12 issues, 15 issues, something like that of Typhoid Mary
Hmm.
just dominating
Yeah.
um and ruining Matt's life even further. Like I
Yeah.
thought after reading Born Again, the graphic novel or
Hmm.
the arc, the Frank Miller arc, that I was like, well, nothing could be worse than that. It's like he drags himself out of the gutter and then it immediately falls away again. And it's just sort
Yeah.
of it's absolutely devastating. And um but I think like a point you brought up in your piece, which I reread today, was that Nocenti is like she doesn't pull any punches when it comes to like the social commentary aspect,
Hmm.
which it reads incredibly, especially nowadays. It feels so kind of modern, which I know
Hmm.
it was like the late '80s when she started, but like it feels very of the now in a lot of the ways that it talks about like poverty versus um, the haves and the have-nots and everything
Right.
like that, and especially sexism. Like with all of
Hmm.
the characters, there's a huge amount of sexism, misogyny
Right.
involved right now. I'm number 9 is a character, which is this like
Hmm.
perfect specimen of a woman that this guy, this horrible guy
Yeah.
makes. And then she becomes like a really interesting character because
Hmm.
she starts out as a Stepford wife and then becomes this really like fully formed person, which is
Hmm.
really, really interesting. And then it's strange to me how versatile, not strange, but it's cool to me how versatile Daredevil is as a character because he can go from
Right.
being, I'm going to beat up muggers and fight the Kingpin to teaming up with the Inhumans and
Hmm.
fighting, mutants and Mephisto and stuff like that. And it all feels really true, I guess, or it doesn't feel like, well, this doesn't really work.
Yeah, it was really cool just like how, she had to write these issues that tied into things like uh all of the mutants and like Inferno and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And like I mean, he's not even really in that Inferno issue very much, but it's like we get that story through the eyes of Johnny Storm. And like that page that starts off that whole issue, um drawn by John Romita Jr., where it's just like Johnny's face as he's, saying "Flame on," but the narration is all about how he's so afraid that one day he's gonna say "Flame on" and he's just gonna burn to death. Like
Right.
as soon as I saw that, I was just like, wow, she's just so creative, and just like that whole kind of dynamic duo of a like creative partnership between her and John Romita Jr. is just like so stellar. I mean, um, I guess like JR isn't for everyone, like especially like with his amazing Spider-Man artwork in recent years, but like I always tell people, I'm like, go back to his stuff on Daredevil because like that's with Al Williamson on inks, like he was just drawing some beautiful forms there. So yeah,
Yeah,
they
and
were
it
just killing it.
absolutely. And it is a little bit more. I don't know. His style is really interesting because I was familiar with him from X-Men. I'm a big Claremont X-Men fan as
Mhm.
well, and so it's interesting kind of jumping between that and his work on Daredevil because, like, it's a little more, I won't say slapdash or anything like that, but it's a little more rough around the edges on Daredevil
Mhm.
in a way that I think actually really works for the way he draws New York City and everything like
Right.
that. Um, I think that is, I haven't read or everything that he's drawn, but like Daredevil to me is like, okay, this is the perfect fit for his kind of art style.
Mhm.
And I'm with you. I think that like he is underrated when it comes to like people don't talk enough about his Daredevil work.
100%. I mean, I think he just the way that he draws the swoop of Matt's hair is just
Oh
like
yeah, it's
it's just
totally.
perfect. Like I'm obsessed with it. I love it. I think about it all the time.
And speaking of hair, like the way he draws Typhoid Mary, her hair is
Mhm.
it's an explosion like coming
Yeah.
out of her head. It's incredible, and in sort of the same way that he draws Mephisto and Blackheart too. Blackheart
Mhm.
makes his first appearance in earlier in the Nocenti run, and it's like just this. It looks very. I don't even know what like. It looks like nightmare fuel. Like it
Yeah.
legitimately looks like somebody brought a nightmare to the page, and it definitely it's expressionistic,
Mhm.
um, and like, but realistic at the same time. It's very
Mhm.
hard. I have a very hard time like pinpointing why art is good, like drawn art, because I did not come from that background at all. But like, I know good stuff when I see it, and it's just like, yeah, I love this, and his covers are incredible as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, just like that Punisher versus Daredevil issue.
Yeah.
Such a famous image. Um, and I love that it's mirroring the perspective that you see the whole issue from, which is from that guy who's just watching them like, beat each other up. And it's just like, what's the point of this?
Yeah. So what are some of your other favorites? You mentioned Bendis, but was the one that sort of got you into modern Daredevil, but is he still among your faves?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like I just spend so much time thinking about Nocenti and JRJR's run, but um, ever since Marvel reprinted um, Bendis's run in those two omnibuses, I've just
Mhm.
been going back and just being like, man, like the writing here, like just like the words themselves are just so beautiful, and it's so like there's something people come to Daredevil for like that gritty realism, but I think there is this sense of poetry and lyricism that Bendis puts in that just makes it really special. And I think I'm just like, wow, this is like literature, like with the capital L.
Mm.
Not that like all of this isn't literature, of course it is, but it's just like from an artistic standpoint, I just am blown away by what Bendis was doing. I also love, Kevin Smith and Joe Quesada's um, run. I mean, like I will say this like until I die. Like, we have the guy who made Dogma to thank for like really putting Daredevil back on the map after the 90s, which like wasn't such a great time for him. And I think, that really creatively fruitful period of the late 90s to early 2000s, we have to thank Kevin Smith for, because he just I don't even know, like he just like really just came out of nowhere and was like, I'm just gonna write this like beautiful story, and you're gonna be like, whoa, like the guy from Clerks did this, but like of course he did
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and it's weird because it's so different from, what he does in movies, but and also, like, I was a big fan of his Green Arrow run. Like, I thought that
Mhm.
was a really
Yeah.
fun time, but it's a complete I mean, they're similar characters in a way, um, but completely differently. It's a much more kind of upbeat, and also, like, the art is part of that as well. Like,
Mhm.
Phil Hester's art on the first chunk, or at least
Right.
Kevin's run on Green Arrow is really, I don't even know what you wanna call it. It's a little more
Dynamic. Yeah.
dynamic, yeah. It's not quite as gritty at all, but then Quesada's art on Daredevil, is great. So anyway, yeah, I'm with you. I think that run is really good, and that was formative.
Mhm.
And I actually, I'm a very like linear, so I'm like I have to kind of go in order. I don't read the
Mhm.
entirety of runs or from beginning to end, but I will read. Like I had to read Nocenti before I could read Bendis. Does that make sense? Like I
Right.
have to,
Yeah.
and so
Mhm.
and then I'll go on to Brubaker after that, and everything like that. But yeah, big huge fan. Were you also a big fan of the original Netflix series?
Yes. Yes. I remember, like, I was watching it with my sibling, and I was just having a great time. Um, but my sibling could not handle the sound effects, particularly when it came to, like, Fisk, decapitating that Russian guy, like, with the car door. They were just like, "I
Yeah,
can't listen to this, like, the sounds are, like, too wet." And once they pointed that out to me, I kept on watching the show, I was like, "Oh, there's a lot of squelching on the show," but,
yeah,
um, I think top to bottom, they really killed it with that Netflix series. I would say, like, season 3 is among, like, my favorite television I've ever seen. I mean, Ray Nadeem as a character was just really, for me, very satisfying to see, because I don't love, like, some of the representations of Asian characters in the previous 2 seasons, but it was finally like, here's an Asian American character who's just a guy who's just trying to, like, provide for his family. He's not perfect, but he's gonna, try his best to do the right thing. I was like, thank you. At least there's one guy here.
yeah. It's tough going back and like reading because 80s were an interesting time
Yeah.
because they were trying. I will give them credit for
Yeah.
trying to, especially Claremont, but others as well. Like we're trying to do
Mhm.
representation, and he clearly, Claremont especially, was a big fan of Asian cultures, which is
Mhm.
a good start. But some of that stuff is just like, oh, did it? Oh,
Oh,
and Frank Miller
yeah.
too. It's like, does it have to be
Yeah.
this like overt? And like,
Yeah.
um, I don't know, like stereotypical and everything like
Mhm.
that. And it's I don't know, like it just
Yeah.
it's of the time, but you do kind of have to
Mhm.
go, okay, guys, I see what you were trying to do.
Yeah.
Didn't have the words for it yet, kind of thing.
Yeah. It's definitely, one of those things where it's like, thankfully, we are no longer at this stage. Culture is evolutionary, hopefully. But that was certainly the case here.
Yeah, very much so. Um, but yeah, I agree. Like I thought the Netflix series was really good. What was your take on some of the other? Like, I liked the first season of Jessica Jones a lot. I thought the first season of Luke Cage was okay. I actually didn't watch any of the Punisher series,
Oh
which
wow.
I hear is good, but at a certain point, I'm just like, I don't need to see people getting shot a million times, you know?
I would say, like, well, The Punisher is 100% worth watching because Ben Barnes is great in it.
Mm.
And then Eben Moss Backrash is really good as Micro. And it took me, like, until like a couple months ago for one of my friends to be like, he was already Micro in the Punisher show. I was like, oh my god, I completely forgot that, the guy who's gonna be Ben Grimm
Right.
has already been in the MCU. But I mean, like, I love that guy in the Bear now, so it's just, another reason to go back and see him play like a very, very self-effacing, very nervous, but
Mm.
also kind of bitter character. I would say on the Punisher, there was more like it was less like people getting shot and more just like Frank really brutally killing people with his fists, which, like, there are some moments that, like, are burned in my brain
Mm.
a little bit, but I think that's when it comes to a character like the Punisher, like, his whole the worst moments in his life have been burned into his brain, unfortunately. And I feel like kind of when we involve ourselves in his story, we also have to kind of accept that we are going to be scarred in a way. Tried to sit through Iron Fist. I watched the episode with Louis Tan in it because, like, I really like Louis Tan as a
Sure.
martial artist, and to be fair, like, I think he brought a lot of charisma to the small role that he had. I also thought, Jessica Henwick was amazing as
Mm.
Colleen Wing. I was like, can we just have like a whole series like just with her? Because she's fantastic. But that show had Typhoid Mary in it, and
See, I didn't even know because I was like, I don't want to watch that. So-
it's not, you are better you're better off just, like, reading those original comics, and
Okay.
it hurts me still.
Oof. And that was like, so I just was gonna skip Iron Fist anyway, and so then I watched, like, the first episode of Defenders and was just like, "This has too much Iron Fist in it," and then
Right.
I never finished that either. So, I definitely my interest in the series kind of waned, and then season 3 of Daredevils was I was back in, but then
Mhm.
by that point, it was sort of the end. The end was nigh.
Right.
Um, which then, you know, it is nice to see that they have sort of recanonized a lot of the stuff or just made it's different from what they did with the, you know, the, um with Star Wars where it's like, let's take the stuff that we like, but put it in a different context. This is
Right.
literally just, okay, that stuff's still canon, probably.
Mhm.
Which I think is, you know, pretty fun. But how do you think, you know, with Born Again, were you super excited that it was coming back? You know, obviously, like we work in the industry, we'd have probably heard that there was some stuff behind the scenes. They had done a fair amount of reshooting and reshuffling of the scripts and things like that. So what was your sort of, before the season began, what was your kind of uh excitement level?
I was really just ready to feel a lot of emotions, and to like be on a thrill ride. Like that whole scene where like he has to escape from the jail in season 3. Like I just was like, I want to like feel like I just got punched in the face and then got like the wind knocked out of me. Like if Born Again can do that and also not kill Karen and not have like terrible things happen to her, and bring Dex back and feature some like good writing, then I'll be a happy camper. And I will say, like, I was just really, really happy to see that, Eldon Henson and Deborah Ann Wall were brought back onto the show, because, that, trifecta right there is really special.
Yeah, I was happy that, you know, more things came out as the season was going along, and it was sort of like that Foggy was going to die off screen. So spoilers, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah.
Hopefully, everyone has watched this by now. We're 20 minutes into this podcast,
Hmm.
but that he was going to die off screen, and Karen was probably not going to be. And it seems like episode 1 and episode 9 were the ones that got the most heavy rewriting.
Hmm.
Um, and that episode, I believe it's 5, is the bank heist episode, was the one
Right.
that had the least amount of anything. I think it was basically
Yeah.
just they had already finished that one, and so that one was the one that they didn't touch. So I think that's an interesting kind of, because that episode is the least tied to anything. It's literally
Hmm.
just a Matt adventure. Um, but also felt the most MCU-y because it had,
Yeah.
you know, a much
Ms.
lighter
Marvel's
tone, even
dad.
though it was, yeah. So it's an interesting kind of, you know, do you think first of all, did you like it? Second of all, do you think it lived up to the hype and the promise that we were hoping for? And do you think that this version of Daredevil fits in with the MCU nicely? Those are 3 big questions, but
um, so I liked it. I liked it a lot. I wouldn't say there was anything. I think with me at this stage in my life and with like my nerdy interests or something, I am happy with adaptations being adaptations and being
mhm,
a separate thing. And like, because really, like, my core love is always going to be, in those original comic stories. And, you know, any amount of adaptations won't change the fact that, I can just go and just read, my floppies and pretend that nothing else exists. Um, what was your second question? Oh,
I don't even remember.
did it
Do
live up
you
to the
did it live up to the kind of what you were hoping it would be based on how much the Netflix series was good?
so it definitely did. I mean, I'm thinking like the fact that they opened the show with that crazy, oneer
Mhm.
between Daredevil and Bullseye was like, and just the fact that they played with kind of the y-axis on frame, and they're going behind, they pull in doors and then the doors like get knocked down. I was like, oh, this is some like Buster Keaton stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I'll be honest, I wanted more Dex because I think Wilson Bethel is just like amazing as Bullseye. But we did see him, spoilers, kill a cop with his tooth. So,
Yeah.
like when that happened, I was like, okay, like I could also die happy now because I
Yeah.
just saw, Bullseye just be crazy. Um, so yeah, like I will say I'm not totally sold on incorporating Daredevil within the larger MCU just because I love Ms. Marvel. I love like Kamala Khan. Um, but it, imagining them like as live action characters interacting with each other that's just a lot for me to like wrap my head around.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and like I love like Kamala's team ups with like Wolverine and like G. Willow Wilson's comics, but I'm not sure if like I'm ready for to see Kamala like interact with some like really like grizzled and like cranky middle-aged men.
Yeah. I- It's a weird one because obviously like we are comics fans and so like
Hmm.
these characters interact all the time in comics and that's part of the fun. Is like who is Wolverine going to team up with this week, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I'm completely with you. Like sometimes it's like I don't know, like and I've been proven wrong before. Like some of the bigger team up movies I've been like,
Hmm.
oh, they actually did work okay, like but I sort of I'm with you. I like it when Matt Murdock shows up in stuff. I liked him
Hmm.
in She-Hulk. I thought that was great. I actually
Yeah,
like She-Hulk quite a bit.
me too.
Come at me, I don't care. Like I
Yeah,
really
no,
liked
come
that.
at me too. Like
I
it was
liked
great.
that show. Um and I thought I was stoked on his little, brief cameo in Spider-Man because like
Hmm.
that was just sort of like we were watching a Spider-Man movie where there was going to be a bunch of like other characters from the Sonyverse, and then all of a sudden Matt Murdock shows up. It was like
Right.
that's rad. Um, but I do kind of think that like while I don't think characters need to be siloed necessarily, and I definitely don't like the way that they did the original Netflix thing where it's like they eventually stopped doing this, but where they just kind of were around to comment on what happened in the movies. And it's like,
Hmm.
come on, we don't need that.
Right.
I like him being his own thing. I like him showing up and stuff, but I want Iron Man as an example to
Hmm.
show up on a Daredevil show? Absolutely not. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't even necessarily want Spider-Man to show up. Not that he can legally, but like um and that makes a lot more sense for Spider-Man to show up in
Yeah.
a Daredevil thing.
That's
So
true.
um I don't know if I actually got to a point, but I liked it, but I liked it kind of on its own merits. Like anytime it
Yeah.
was too heavily referencing the MCU, with a couple of exceptions, I was kind of like, like, you know,
You can kind of see the seams when
yeah.
stuff like that happens, and that I think it always makes me feel uncomfortable. It's kind of like when you see I don't even know what example I'm trying to bring up here. Like it's like when you're like a little kid and you're like on a movie set or something and you see that like the buildings are actually like fake or something.
Mhm.
You're like you feel like you shouldn't be seeing something and it makes you feel weird. Like that's kind of the sensation I feel. Um and I'm just I guess like another thing I'm a little bit bummed about is like where is Moon Knight? You know,
Yeah,
like
where is he? No
I
idea.
I think Layla is a great character and I'm glad that she exists just like within the world, but I will say like as a big Moon Knight fan I am pretty salty about the way the choices that that show made. Um particularly, with regards to the fact that we never see well, we do see Mark, fighting and doing Moon Knight stuff, but it doesn't really dig into like his relationship with violence.
Mm.
That so many of his comics spotlight, but I'm just like let's see a Daredevil Moon Knight team up like that thing is so natural. So maybe season two's on the way. Like I'm sure it'll happen at some point, but yeah, like what's going on with Moon Knight these days?
Yeah, I often forget that that was a show, and
Hmm.
not because I didn't. I I will be honest, I was not a huge fan of that show, but there were
Hmm.
parts of it I liked. I liked the fact that Moon Knight was there and they
Yeah.
devoted an entire show to it. I thought Oscar Isaac was good. I wanted more Mark, obviously, but
Hmm.
whatever. But I forget that that happened because that was,
Yeah.
a few years ago and it has absolutely no bearing. It's the same way it's like, oh yeah, when they when they announced that during the infamous Chairs event,
Hmm.
when uh there was like, hey, guess what? Shang-Chi's gonna actually be in another movie. And it's like,
Yeah.
wow, really? Like, I thought you guys forgot about him.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like those. What was it? Phase 4, Phase 5. Like
That
that
was
specific
phase
phase.
4, I guess, yeah.
Yeah. Those characters really got shafted.
They really did. It's so weird. I mean, that's the thing about these phases nowadays, and it just seems like because this is neither here nor there about Daredevil specifically, but like part of me is like, we know there's going to be a Secret Wars, which more than likely reboot everything. So why am I caring about what's happening in between? Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because they'll keep what they want and stuff like that. But it's like you're going to reboot the universe and have mutants be involved. It's like, what do I really care that like Wilson Fisk is the mayor? Like, honestly, like,
Yeah.
and so I have to kind of ignore some of that stuff to enjoy the show on its own merits, because like you said, like you do kind of start to see the seams of like this big universe, and then I don't know how this show is going to fit into this big universe.
Yeah. I really have no idea. Like, I think really when season 2 comes out, like that's really going to be when the show properly begins.
Mm,
Um, I certainly got that sense with the way that season 1 ended.
mm.
Um, but like when spoilers, um,
Yeah, we can stop saying spoilers. It's fine. This we're talking about the show.
yeah, I would assume like people have hit pause.
Yeah,
When Matt is talking about like we are the city without fear, I was like Luke Cage, Luke Cage, Luke Cage. We're gonna see Luke Cage.
yeah,
Just because there's so much that this show borrows from Devil's Reign, and like Devil's Reign, Luke is a huge part of that, and it's about Luke really becoming the mayor that New York deserves. And I'm just a big fan of Luke Cage, and so I was just when Matt said to Karen like we need to build an army, I'm like, okay, like you gotta have Luke Cage there, like the guy's bulletproof, he's just a great guy to have, and we didn't see him, so I'm just like in my head, I'm just like holding out to see Mike
yeah.
Coulter.
I could see that absolutely happening. I think like, at the end when he's like, we're going to need more than this. And it's just like, I
Hmm.
have an idea for at least a few people that you could get.
Hmm.
So I thought that was cool. I did like bringing Jacques Duquesne into the mix.
Yeah.
And the fact that he's kind of, we see little bits that there are other vigilantes in the city, and we just see that one little phone video of swordsmen fighting, which is very funny
Hmm.
to me.
Yeah,
Um,
that was really funny. It was just like
but
really low quality.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so that I liked a lot, and there's room for heroes like Luke Cage to show up, and it makes sense because we know who they are. If you're gonna have if Daredevil and Punisher are canon, like ergo, so are at least Jessica Jones and Luke Cage, at least Luke Cage.
Let's hope.
Um, that would be really great. But yeah, so that's my hope for next season. But let's
Hmm.
actually talk about the proper season before we get into like
For
our hopes
sure.
for next year. So yeah, I completely agree. I think the opening is great. I am a big fan of Wilson Bethel, as you are, and also just like Bullseye being the one that like breaks Matt makes complete sense to me, because that
Hmm.
is kind of what happens, in the
Yeah.
comics over and over again. So that was really an interesting thing. What did you think about having a whole season, more or less, where Matt doesn't have, isn't Daredevil essentially? He's kind of just a lawyer who eventually punches people in the face.
Yeah. Um, I think he needs to have that. Matt is such a. I think in a lot of this comes from like the Catholicism of it all. Like he often thinks in absolutes, and he thinks if I swing one way, then I need to swing the other way if I don't want to be like the other. If I don't want to be a worse version of myself, and he thinks that he can find deliverance or a sense of atonement in being something that he hasn't been for quite some time. And I think, part of being a Daredevil fan is being very frustrated with his decisions a lot of the times.
Yes.
Whether that's like, just being really terrible to the women in his life, or, just making, or just, like wallowing too much in his own self pity. Um, so I was, fine with being a little bit frustrated with him, and being like, dude, just like get in the suit. Like, no one else is gonna like come and help these people. You just got to do it. But I love that we got to spend time with Kirsten McDuffie. It was lovely to have like another character from the comics return. Um, and yeah, it was good to see like Matt discover the limits of being so devoted to the system, and getting to see firsthand like there's a lot of systemic injustices at play, and you can't you know just expect to work within the system and find a solution to that.
Yeah, that was some of my favorite parts of the season where he's just working as a lawyer at this, and I'm trying to remember what episode it is. If it is it 4 maybe? Shoot, I can't remember. But basically he's like, all right, fine, I'll go plead this guy out, the guy who steals
Mhm.
caramel corn. And
Right.
then like that ends up being one of the best like little mini things in an
Mhm.
episode where he's like, just plead out, man. And the guy's like, no, like it's I'm tired
Yeah.
of this. And he kind of like comes around to it because, Matt's this hotshot lawyer, but he's also like, if he's going to be like a hero or whatever, a beneficiary of the people, like you have to know who you're actually defending. And I thought
Exactly.
that whole sequence was really great and kind of, it felt like it was in a different show in a good way.
Mhm.
Where it was like, I could see a whole show where it's just Matt Murdock doing lawyer stuff, and I'd actually kind of be into it at times.
Mhm.
And that was like the biggest like win in that sense.
For sure.
Um, what are so yeah, I agree. What did you think about uh BB Urich, uh, being
Yeah.
Ben's niece, which was nice because that's a type callback to the first season of their Netflix series, but her being like the news, because
Yeah.
another huge part of the comics.
I thought it was really beautiful how we got to see New York kind of from this street level point of view with her little news segments. I thought that was really unique and frankly something that we've been missing from the MCU. I mean, like the Spider-Man movies try to do that, like, but just because like Peter Parker is supposed to be this everyman, um, but literally having like interviews with like normal New Yorkers, trying to just figure out like how the city feels about itself. I think it's just really special, and I'm glad that there was somebody to like kind of carry the torch in terms of uh, Daredevil's relationship with like journalistic professionals, I suppose.
Hmm.
Um, and I love Ben Urich, and I was, you know, as much as I love the Netflix show, like I have always been kind of sad that he got killed off so quickly, just
Yeah.
because he's such a great character. Um, so I was glad to see, like, there's another Urich family member doing the work there.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great. And especially reading the Frank Miller and the Ann Nocenti run, like before and while this show was airing, it was sort of like Ben Urich is such a big part of all
Hmm.
that stuff. And just, if it's not Ben Urich, it's other Daily Bugle like
Right.
reporters. Like Daredevil needs to kind of have that um uh aspect to it, because that, same as Spider-Man really, but it just sort of feels like vigilantism in the world's biggest city, like, you know, or America's anyway.
Hmm.
I don't know, don't come at me. don't, I don't know what's actually the biggest city, but um I think that's big. That's that's why you set it in New York, is so that you
Right.
can have these kind of, and I do think that like um the BB kind of filmed segments, I guess you could say like, well, that's the same thing they did in the Spider-Man movie where it's like, well, I like him, I hate him and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they really felt like real people, like, in a way that I was kind of surprised about. Like, did they actually just ask real people to give their opinion on stuff? And then it's like, well, no, because they're talking about Daredevil. Like, I don't know how that would work.
Yeah, it felt very like New York to me. I don't live
Mm,
in New York anymore, but I'm like, it's one of the things New Yorkers have. It's that we have a lot of opinions about like our city and the people in charge and what could be improved or where people are wasting their time. And I'm just glad that someone understood that aspect about the city, and it's something so nebulous and something you can't really quantify or unless you spent some significant time there. Um, so that was just very satisfying for me to see on screen.
and speaking of New Yorkers kind of needing to have, I don't know how I'm saying the sentence properly, but that I wanted to tie that to the way that Fisk is like, great, I'm the mayor now. And then like he just quickly realizes, oh, you can't just do whatever you want.
Yeah.
I mean, he does eventually, but like early
Hmm.
on, that was stuff that I really like too, is seeing Fisk of all people, who is just used to crushing heads,
Right.
going like, I'm gonna try to be good and I'm gonna try to like actually lead the city. And then like, obviously he's never going to not be Wilson Fisk, but like when they get out of the car on the bridge and he's like, I'm gonna fix the bridge, and it's just like
Yeah.
it's like that's not really how politics works, but um calling out that there is usually so much red tape I thought was a
Hmm.
really cool, because if anybody would be frustrated about that, it'd be Kingpin, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
um
Absolutely.
did you like that thing? I mean, obviously it happens in the comics, but like, did you like the way that they handled Fisk as the mayor this season?
Um. Yeah. Because it brought, and I think so much of this is due to just how great Vincent D'Onofrio is
Yeah,
as an actor.
so
Um.
good.
But I loved that the way they approached Fisk was very much along similar lines to how Matt's presented, particularly in like Charles Soule's run and like Chip Zdarsky's run, where there's this like fine line between brutality and civility.
Mm,
Um, because like both of them, they got their nice suits on, and like they know how to interact with people in public spaces in a way that's abides by certain like social rules and whatnot. But you know they also just like beat the living daylights out of people all the time, and they have this really violent streak inside of them that they have to be mindful of. So what does it mean to like constantly be straddling that line between getting blood on your hands and being able to like function more or less normally within society? So it was very interesting to see Fisk operating within like kind of the most um, establishment zone that one could be in, which is like being in Gracie Mansion. Um, and it was lovely to see like kind of that simmering rage that's like kind of just underneath his skin the whole time, especially as like the stakes get higher and higher as the season progresses.
yeah, I think that was he, earlier on when he has to like stifle the rage while he's talking to other people. It is really interesting, and like you see there's that episode where he has to like go to the different stuff. Yes, it's like you got a full docket today. We're doing a bunch of appearances, and he's just like having to sit and listen to these kids, and he's
Yeah.
just like, I do not want to do this one bit. I thought that was really like a humanizing moment for a character
Hmm.
that is, for being a big larger than life villain, like he is a very human character,
Right.
which I really like. But that was just sort of like it just made me laugh. And also like
Yeah.
he does not seem like somebody who kids would relate to at all.
No.
Which
No. Or like I don't know. If I was a kid, I'd be like really afraid of him.
yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
mean, he's just a big guy, and he just like has this voice, and like I
Yeah.
just wouldn't know. I just wouldn't know what to do with him.
I really liked the kind of through line. Obviously, Vanessa is his sort of like Achilles heel or whatever,
Hmm.
like but also like his partner in a lot of ways. But I like the fact that she's basically running the show on the criminal side of things. He kind of
Right.
just goes, "Don't tell me about it." But
Hmm.
also, I'm still the kingpin. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I thought that was really great. And then also that he had been keeping her, the person she had a tryst with, like just locked up because
Yeah.
he's like, this is the way I can be a bad guy. I'm not going to kill you, but I am going to make your life miserable.
Hmm.
How dare you, kind of thing. And it just
Yeah.
felt really bad for Adam, who's
Yeah. Yeah.
uh
I like that Vanessa like had much more agency
100%.
in this season, and like
Yeah.
she, you can just see like there's machinations going on like behind her eyes, and like she's feeling kind of sick of Wilson, and
Mm,
and you know not feeling that she can get to like come into her own, because she's like clearly quite capable of much more than we thought she was capable of. um and so I'm like really on board with seeing where she goes, because it's like, oh, like they gotta watch out for her. Like,
yeah.
she's not just like a stock character now who he just like invokes whenever he's wants to be mad at someone. Like, she's got her own thing going on.
And you kind of get the sense that, especially in the therapy sessions, which I thought were really interesting, but like you get like they are each other's kind of Achilles heel. Like they
Hmm.
are both perfect and terrible for each other in a way that um a lot of really interesting like on-screen and just fictional couples can be. Um but like the fact that she could have and probably should have to run the business like just completely kicked Wilson to the curb and all this stuff
Yeah.
with all the other, and then instead she kills off that one mob boss, or
Mhm.
has him killed, I guess, is I thought was really smart. And then the fact that she's the one who kills Adam, because she's kind of like, okay, you can't just have a guy down here that you beat up
Right.
all the time, so I'll just kill him for you. And then that's like the happiest they are after that. Like when
Yeah.
they're like dancing at the party and they're like
Yeah.
having a great time, and it's just sort of like, you guys are sick, but I love it, kind of.
Yeah, I'm like, it's maybe this is a bad comparison, but it kind of reminded me of like Phantom Thread, like after the mushrooms, like thing, where it's
Sure.
like, oh, both of you are so messed up, but like they're just perfect for each other. So I guess I'm happy for you guys.
Yeah. Good for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
um Matt Murdock, my coworker Mikey Walsh, who is a frequent contributor to this show, and I have often talked about who is the most Catholic Marvel character. Is it Matt, or is it Nightcrawler? And it's also in the running for which one of them gets the most women, because they
Hmm.
sure both do.
Yeah.
I think we came down on the side of Matt being more Catholic because he feels more guilty about things.
Yeah.
But um, so to that point, I liked that he had a love interest, because he always does. He's Matt
Hmm.
Murdock. But what do you think of Heather Glenn, kind of? Because I think that, like, I liked the performance a lot. I liked the character a
Hmm.
lot. I don't 100% know if I bought her actual like arc. I don't really understand why she would hate vigilantes from the start, or just going from, I think they're
Hmm.
really interesting case studies, to even equating Muse to Daredevil makes no sense
Right.
to me, because it's like, this man's clearly insane
Yeah.
and wanted to kill you, and Daredevil saved your life. Like, I don't get that. But
Yeah.
what did you think of Heather?
Yeah. No. Now that you've said that, I am in agreement of it. I mean, I was really afraid for her. The whole season I was like,
Sure.
"Oh, I don't think Heather's making it out alive." Just given Matt's luck. But
Yeah.
um yeah, it was weird that she was just so ready to be on board with Fisk and like, kind of write off vigilantes, because we also have those scenes, thanks to BB Urich, where we see how positively Daredevil is seen by so many New Yorkers. And so it's like, Heather, I know you're from Queens, but like, like you're also like a New Yorker. Like, uh, I'm sure she would probably know someone who knows someone who knows someone, who directly had an experience with a vigilante or something. So part of me was like wondering, like, oh, did she have like a weird experience with one in the past? Like, I feel like there's more of a story there, but I do feel like that was kind of left like undeveloped, and I'm not. I wasn't really so into how she ends in the season. Like,
Me neither.
she's just like, yeah, like, I'm just gonna salute like, Mayor Fisk and like be his communications manager or something. I understand that she was probably, she's kind of being strong armed into this, but I hope that like season two kind of brings more complexity to her, or at least provides more explanations.
Yeah, I think that was my big takeaway, because I liked her early on in the season and everything like that, and I love the fact that she ended up being the marriage counselor for the Fisks. I thought
Hmm.
that was a really cool idea, but like it just sort of seemed like the plot needed her to do something, and
Hmm.
maybe they didn't want to just kill her off the way that a lot of other women get killed off in these types of shows. Um, but I just kind of don't buy that she would just so readily take the job with Fisk, and maybe she's doing it for her own motives, and we'll learn that next season. But
Hmm.
like, um, that just to me felt like, well, I guess they can't all side with Daredevil. It's just, I
Right.
don't know. It just seemed silly to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially since like, on the opposite end, like Bullseye is kind of left, in this state of ambiguity
Mm.
because, like, obviously he's not a fan of Fisk. But because he's Bullseye and he's a sociopath, like, is he gonna I don't think he can be, reformed as an anti-hero or something. I wouldn't expect him to be, at least. So where is Heather gonna fall next season? Where's Bullseye gonna fall next season? I suppose only time will tell.
Yeah. And it's not like wanted her to get killed off or anything like
Mhm.
that. And I'm happy she's around, but
Yeah.
it was I kind of don't. She started so much more interesting than she ended up,
Mhm.
and again, we'll see what happens next season because this is very much a first half, like you said earlier.
Yeah.
Like it does feel like we're going to get the bulk of what they wanted to do as a storytelling medium, like in season
Mhm.
2. Um, and it's going to be, it's like it's chaos. It's New York has
Mhm.
fallen into pure like horror, in a way that feels very believable. But
Yeah.
yeah, huge bummer, but true.
Mhm.
What about, so obviously we talked a little bit about the Punisher earlier on, but like, what do you think about him coming back in that one episode, partway through as just a
Mhm.
sort of a cameo and then becoming a huge like part of the end, and also the cops using his
Yeah.
iconography, what did you think about all that?
So, as like a quick aside, I was there at New York Comic Con when like, you know, at that Daredevil panel where they showed the trailer for the first time, and the screams that these like so many men in the room let out when they showed Beardy John Bernthal, but it's just like burned in my mind. It was so funny. It was just the sound of like dozens and dozens of men, including myself, just like losing their minds. And I very much like feel that way about like the Punisher in this season. I mean, like that line that he has like when Matt goes to visit him and he recounts how like he hears his little boy saying like, "Get him, daddy, like, get him," and I was like, "Oh my god, it's breaking my heart. Like, Frank, you are so damaged, but like, you poor man, but also
Yeah.
like, please go to therapy." Like, but it, he's Frank Castle. He's never gonna do that.
No.
Um, I actually really appreciated how he had that line like, "Oh, you served? Like, do you know what it means to be of service?" Like, kind of mocking that, like, that "thank you for your service" line. I just appreciated that because I was like, yeah, like, Frank is a Marine, and it's I also, I come from, like, a military family, and, like, I will tell you, like, the military screws people over, like, big time, and just to have a character acknowledge that and someone like the Punisher who really people wouldn't expect him, people as in like lay people wouldn't expect him to be like very forthcoming about his emotions and the way that he's kind of struggled in the world, to acknowledge that and to be angry just made me feel really happy in a weird way. That sounds like a weird thing to say, but I was just glad that like it exists within society, as a point.
Yeah.
And that scene where he gets to like look at all those cops wearing the skulls and just being like, "You don't know a thing about me. You don't know what I've been through. You don't know what I feel. You don't know what I think." Um, and yeah, that was all very cathartic for me. Um, I was just like ready to jump into the screen and just be like, "I'll get you out, Frank. Like, you definitely don't need my help, but like, I'm just gonna come anyways because I really want to support you."
Yeah, I thought that was a really important thing to do too, is like, because you could, again, lay people might see the Punisher and like he's got guns and has
Hmm.
skull and like all this stuff, and it's like, okay, so he's just a violent murderer, which technically true.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but it really separates, like, he's not a part of the system. He
Hmm.
doesn't like these guys. He's
Yeah.
like, you guys are, you don't understand, like, you don't understand my pain, but also
Hmm.
you don't understand my motives. Like,
Hmm.
the kind of like, how dare you use my
Exactly.
image for this? And I thought that was really important because cops like doing that would
Hmm.
piss off Frank Castle. He would not be
Yeah.
okay with cops using his image and his skull emblem. Like, he would be mad about it. And I thought that
Yeah.
that was really, I'm glad that they went there so
Hmm.
directly, so
Yeah.
that we had John Bernthal literally saying, "You guys are lame, go
Yeah.
away, like shut up," and all this stuff. I thought that was excellent.
Yeah.
Um, and I also really liked that we have the moment which happens so much in the comics, where uh, Punisher says to Daredevil, "Just kill him." That's,
Hmm.
and we see the ideological differences, because
Hmm.
that is what separates Daredevil from Frank, is like, I
Yeah.
refuse to cross that line.
Yeah. Like that is done so beautifully
Yeah.
in Chip Zdarsky and Marco Ghetto's run. Like, ugh, it just destroys me every time. So if you haven't read that run, definitely go read it.
There's a lot I haven't read, but I have
Yeah.
read some of it. I will say enough to go, yeah, that was good. Um, yeah, for sure. I really liked that last episode. I understand that last episode was very actiony on purpose because they
Mhm.
were trying to be like, and we're bringing back the action because the season hasn't been super actiony. There's been enough. There was more than I expected, honestly,
Mhm.
um, but you have, the city falling apart. You have Daredevil fighting basically for his life and the life of everybody he knows, and then
Mhm.
the Punisher showing up full regalia, like
Mhm.
shaved and ready to go. And I there was, and the fact that Bullseye was around doing Bullseye stuff, it was just like, okay, this is comics to me, and I'm
Mhm.
really stoked that it's happening this way.
Yeah.
Um, and it didn't feel cheap, which I think,
Mhm.
I don't know if I've seen a lot. It just, as we're recording this, it literally just ended like yesterday. So I haven't seen a ton of reaction to it one way or the other, but like, I think there's a world where somebody might think that, well, that's just a cheap way to end. Like you have the superhero moment that kind of cops out on what the rest of the season was about. But to me, it was all escalating to that in the first place.
Mhm.
And like, and despite not physically being on screen a lot, Frank Castle's presence and his ethos were kind of all throughout the season. And I thought that was really just a great way that they were back together
Yeah.
ever
Yeah.
so briefly.
I mean, I really feel like the Punisher haunts Daredevil,
Mhm.
really. Like, and there's always going to be echoes of that. And I think the Netflix show really set that up well. And I think, just John Bernthal is such a great actor. Like, you just got to bring him back.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm glad that they were able to be like, we're gonna bring the Punisher back, but we're also gonna like address the elephant in the room, um, more than once. And I don't know. I just really respect the showrunners for that.
Yeah. And they do not pull punches in a
Mhm.
lot of ways in this. They said it was going to be a violent show, and it was, but that
Mhm.
last episode is like ridiculously
Yeah.
violent.
Yeah. I was
Um
like, oh, is this directed by David Cronenberg now? Like I was like, wow.
yeah. Well, I thought that I think episode 2 maybe, where Matt fights the cops
Mhm.
in his client, or
Yeah.
the
The
informants.
witnesses. Yeah.
Yeah. And he breaks that guy's arm and like his bone
Yeah.
pops out. It was just, geez, like, okay,
Yeah.
wasn't quite expecting that. But yeah, the last episode was just like bullets, blood,
Mhm.
bones crunching. Like it was, I'd be interested to hear what your sibling thinks of this episode
I'm
of
sure
all
they
the
wouldn't watch
squelching.
it. Yeah, but maybe one of these days I'll force them to.
um, but it was also just really nice I mean, Deborah Ann Wall's a treasure. So it
Mhm.
was really nice to see Karen come back. Because she is kind of Matt's opposite number, in my opinion. Like
Mhm.
in a lot of, if Frank is his, like, if Daredevil's opposite number, like Karen kind of needs to be there as a grounding force
Yeah.
for Matt. And I just like that she was a much bigger part than they had
Mhm.
initially planned. Um, and you also see like, but maybe that's why they didn't know what to do with Heather, because it's like, well, now Karen's back, so like,
Right.
there's really no
Oop.
room.
Yeah. Yeah, that hospital scene.
Yeah. Yeah, that was, but yeah, it's shaping up to be a really interesting season too. I also really like, I want to shout out the character Cherry, as played by
Mhm.
Clark Johnson, who I always like Clark Johnson. He's great in everything.
Mhm.
I really liked that character a lot, as because that's somebody that like lawyers do have, as private eyes who go do stuff. And I
Right.
like the fact that even Daredevil needs a private eye to go do
Mhm.
kind of investigative stuff. And so I was really glad to see that he kind of made it out. Whether he makes it out next season, we'll see. But like,
Right.
the little like crew of Daredevil people at the end, and then you had the people in the cages, including
Mhm.
Punisher and Swordsman, and then you have the Fisk, like horrible
Mhm.
fascist jackbooted thugs. Um, yeah, I think there's so much promise for next season.
Mhm.
And again, I don't think that this season was bad or anticlimactic at all. But like, I think I think there's a lot of room for some really interesting storytelling and just some like back to basics, kind of brutal Daredevil
Yeah,
fights next season.
100%. And Matthew Lillard is on, so I'm excited. He's just an interesting actor.
Mm,
So I'm very curious to see what he is going to be doing.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. I know that Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead are back as lead directors.
That's good.
That's good. Yeah, I think they have they bring in really interesting kind of like style to it.
Hmm.
They were the main directors, if not the only directors, I don't actually know, of Moon Knight, and then they kind of took over main director duties for Loki season 2. And if you're going to have like weird indie directors do
Hmm.
your do your Marvel stuff, I think they're kind of among the more interesting choices who actually seem to get the stuff that they're doing and bring
For
their
sure.
kind of, because if anybody's not seen their feature films, they are all
Hmm.
very strange,
Yeah.
and really enjoyable, but really, really weird.
Hmm.
So it's kind of cool that it's like, well, now they're in charge of Loki and Daredevil, and it's so
Good
super
for
fun.
them.
Yeah, good for them. Jules, is there anything that we didn't talk about that you wanted to talk about with this season?
I think you really covered it. I mean, I guess like I will say I miss Father Lantham. Like I
Yeah,
miss just like having like just like a Catholic man of the
yeah. There
cloth.
wasn't. This one wasn't churchy enough. It was not nearly churchy enough.
And like give me some like, really juicy shots of like St. Patrick's.
Yeah,
Um it's okay. Like there's always going to be season 2.
sure.
That stuff is coming. I do miss Sister Maggie a lot,
Yeah,
I will say. But, I am happy with what we got.
me too. I it's interesting. I'm going to go back and watch season 3 again, just because I think I'm kind of like still in a Daredevil mood,
Mhm.
um, and maybe that's unfair to like immediately watch the best version of the
Right.
show right after this. But I liked it. I thought it was um, a good case study for let's bring some of a grittier element into the
Mhm.
MCU without it being funny, because that's what Daredevil or
Right.
Deadpool and Wolverine was, which was silly, like over the top, violent kind of
Mhm.
darkness. Whereas this is not, and I
Yeah,
think there's room for that too.
absolutely.
Before I let you go, I do want to. We have some movies coming up. What are your thoughts? I don't know if you've seen any of them. I don't think anybody has yet, but are you excited for Thunderbolts and Fantastic Four and Superman?
Yes, yes, and yes. I mean, I'm a simple man. Like, I see Bucky Barnes and something, I watch it,
Yep.
I have a good time. And like Sebastian Stan has only gotten better as an actor. Um,
100%.
and yeah, I mean, like, I felt like I was the only person in the world who really liked Ghost. Um, so it's good to see that she's going to be in another movie. And then, Fantastic Four, like, the cast has me sold. Just that shot of Johnny flying through the city, like, on
Yeah.
fire. Like, it just gave me chills. I was like, oh my God, of course this is what it would look like, if you were a Human Torch. Um, but, like, Superman, like, I feel like I kind of been waiting my whole life for like a movie like that, and
Yeah.
I can't wait to see how it goes. I mean, David Corenswet was just so funny in Twisters. He was just such a terrible character in that movie, and I'm just really excited to see him play just someone who's just incredibly wholesome. After saying lines like "I don't care about the people," it's just great.
Yeah. I'm I wasn't all that excited about Captain America 4. We've talked about that to death on this podcast, but the closer we get to Thunderbolts, the more excited I am for it. The more I hear
Hmm.
kind of murmurings that people really seem to like it. I think that's really exciting. But yeah, like Superman and Fantastic Four, like we need a good Fantastic Four movie, and I'm
Yeah.
dying for one that kind of gets the vibe, the kind of
Hmm.
Silver Age vibe that we need. But I'm with you, like this Superman movie is like I'm putting too much hope into this one Superman movie, but like I think it has so much potential to be the Superman movie.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if there's one thing that Superman represents, it's hope, and I don't
That's
think we're misguided for
You
putting a
got
lot
me.
of hope in that.
You got me. That's exactly right. Jules, thank you so much for joining me to talk about Daredevil.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. How can people find you and your work on the internet should they choose to do so?
So I am no longer on the site formerly known as Twitter.
Me
But
neither.
yeah,
Get
I mean,
out of there.
I've lived my life has gotten so much better without it.
Yeah.
Um, but you can find me on Blue Sky at Jules Chin Greene. That's green with an E after the end. Um, and then I'm also on Instagram as Infinite Vibes. Um, I don't know, what other social media do I have? I think that's all I have. So yeah, that's where you
Yeah.
can find me.
It's kind of it anymore. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. I have an Instagram and I have a Blue Sky that I do not check on any regular occasion. But folks, you can follow me on Letterboxd if you want to, because I do post a lot
Right.
about the stuff that I watch at Kyle_Anderson. Once again, thank you so much, Jules, for being on the show. I really appreciate it. I've been Kyle Anderson. Join me again next week on Laser Focus when my guest will be a different person. Bye-bye. Laser Focus is a production of Nerdist Industries and Legendary Digital Networks. It was produced, edited, and hosted by me, Kyle Anderson. For more, visit nerdist.com.